Hello, you are listening to On the Topic. And this week, you're going to find me throwing my controller at my television because this guy is a bullet sponge. I'm Dan.
And I'm going to be bouncing around the walls, trying to avoid being cut into pieces, but ultimately saving the day. I'm Alex. And this week, Dan, we are going to be talking about your favourite and my favourite and everyone else's favourite computer game bosses.
It's been a while since we've done our favourite episode. So this is our first one of 2022, and I'm really looking forward to this one. Very excited.
I've got to say, it's taken me back, and I've got to be honest, I've also had to watch a fair amount of YouTube videos just to kind of remember the build up to the bosses, because some of these games I'm going to be talking about in a little bit are actually quite old. And I know it takes us back to, what was it, OTT, which one was it? The computer games, 48, OTT 48, where we'll talk about your favourite computer games. It made me sound pretty old, and I think I'm going to be doing it again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and Dan. But hey, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, we've got a fantastic back catalogue of games to reference. And I know I've got some absolute bangers and classics that probably most of our listeners, and in fact you, Dan, the first of my half, probably have never heard of. So if nothing else, it might be an education. But at the very worst, I'm going to feel pretty old. But there we go. But before we get into that, Dan, what have you been up to? Anything exciting?
Just busy. It's been crazy at work. Is what it is. But I'm off to York tomorrow. At the time of recording, I'm off to York.
Lovely.
A couple of days. So anyone that does park run, not me.
Well, you watch.
I watch. I spectathlete. It's hard work, Alex, spectathleting, and it's just hard work. You have to watch all these people run around a field or up and down a concourse, wherever they have these park runs. And I'm just tired watching. Just get me my bacon bap and I'm happy. So my other half and myself driving up, we are going to catch up with her mum and her niece who are already up there now.
Lovely.
So they do park run. They're doing the park run alphabet. So they're going to get a Y this week. But this trip isn't just for them. This is for me as well. We're going to go to Brew York, one of the craft beer breweries in the UK. Get some street food and beers on, and then come home the next day.
Ooh,
So
nice.
looking forward to a bit of time in York, and then just a long weekend. So 4-day weekend. Just going to chill, going to enjoy it. Spend some time with the extended fam. And if there is any clattering or banging in the background while I'm talking, that's just my other half. We are just setting up the spare room for our guests. So her mum and niece will be coming home with us as well for a couple of days. What about you, Alex? What have you been up to?
Much the same, Dan. Just busy. It's a busy start to the year. Generally try not to spend too much money and a bit drab and dreary outside, but things are looking up. Well, at least in the UK at the moment, you know, it's not quite so cold anymore. So yeah, looking forward to the sunnier days that are coming. And we booked some holidays later on in the year, so stuff to look forward to. But no, nothing terribly exciting, just usual fare, Dan. But nothing wrong with that, because sometimes it's got to be a bit quiet to enjoy the business. And to that end, we are going to be talking, as we said before, about favourite gaming bosses. So do we know who recommended this one? Was it a listener who recommended this one, or did we come up with it?
I will have a quick look. I think it might have been between us, to be honest. I think it's one of our episodes, but of course we do have a big list of... Yeah, I think it was us, but we still have a list of episodes that people have recommended. And say over the next few weeks, probably catch up, have a beer, and we might have some potential guests this year.
Yes, along tonight's theme, but I don't say too much in case it doesn't come off. But yeah, some potentially some exciting things and some exciting conversations coming up. But as you say, Dan, a beer must be had first and foremost.
Definitely.
So, yes, this week we are going to be talking about, I mean, some of the ones I've got down. Well, again, as usual, fair on the topic, guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. We don't talk about our notes, so I don't know what Dan's got. I might have a rough idea, but I think he's going to go largely away from mainstream. And I've got some here, which this is the interesting thing. When I first wrote this, I was thinking, well, what do you define as favorite?
Mm.
Because is it that you get the payoff at the end? And the payoff at the end, the completing of the game or the level or the mission, doesn't necessarily mean that it was a slugfest. Doesn't mean that you were squeezing your controller and throwing out the wall, becoming frustrated. I mean, there are a couple of those in my list that meet that criteria.
Oh, yes.
But actually, some of them are just really good ways to finish off a storyline. And actually, you get that release. Do you know what I mean? So, cause some games you can spend hours upon hours upon hours. You know, back in the day, games used to last, I don't know, easy 50, 60 hours if you did it properly. Nowadays, you're lucky if you can reach 12 or 20. And this is not me, by the way, saying modern AAA titles are rubbish, not good for value, not greatly written. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they tended to take longer. And so when you got to that end, because save points invariably didn't exist, right? You know, when we looked at the Spectrum, or you looked at the
beautiful,
the Mega Drive, the Master System, the Game Boy, which I'll talk about, you didn't really have save points on a lot of the games, either because they didn't require them because they weren't that long enough, or because they just weren't built into the code. So when you actually finally completed it, it really was like a running a marathon. And that was where I kind of came from, a number of different angles on my list. But yeah, it's bittersweet. It's a great payoff, and sometimes it's just a great way to end the game.
Oh, good way to start a game.
How so?
Just a nice little introduction, isn't it? Sort of.
Oh, I see.
You know, a nice easy start. You know, the first boss is never that difficult. Although I think we might talk about that in a little while. But yeah, sometimes it's just a nice way to introduce things and
get you eased into it.
Yeah, just ease you in, or maybe it's just a good part of the storyline. Doesn't have to be the finale.
It doesn't. So with that in mind, shall I kick us off, Dan, this week?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's go back, Dan, all the way back to a simpler time. Alex, age 7 or 8. Disney's Darkwing Duck.
Oh, boy.
1992 on the Game Boy. The black and green screened 8-bit wonder was the Game Boy. So for our listeners who aren't familiar with this, and there might be a couple, you put your AAA batteries into the back. It's a mobile device thing, and it's very simple. It's all pixelated. It's an 8-bit game, and they're cartridges. So usually what you'd have is an A4, or I guess an A5 size box, and in there would be your paper pamphlet with the instructions, which invariably is a load of gumph, and you have your plastic cartridge, which is in a nice little see-through box. Do you have a Game Boy, Dan?
I did, yes. So I had the classic one, the big chunky one, but it was the yellow one. And then a bit later on, I had the Game Boy Color, and I remember the Game Boy Color very well. I remember one Christmas, I got the camera that went into it with the printer.
Right, yeah.
So I had that, and that was good fun. I don't know where that is now, to be honest. It's probably lost amongst the several house moves that me and my parents made.
Hopefully it's somewhere in a box in an attic somewhere, because that might be worth some money in the near future. Anyway, that's Nintendo Game Boy. So one of my earliest games, Darkwing Duck. Again, it's not really an IP that's often used now by Disney, but it was effectively it was modeled on Daffy Duck, wasn't it? But he was a crime fighter.
Yeah.
Quite an incompetent one, but he was a crime fighter. He looked quite cool with his cape and his mask on. Anyway, this game was based on that character from the TV show. Well, Dan, the plot. Well, the plot of this game is very simple. He says, a mysterious crime wave has hit St. Canard, and Shush, which is SHUSH, requires the service of a Cape crime fighter, Darkwing Duck, to stop it, as it appears that FOWL, foul, and their valued operative, Steelbeak, is behind the uprising. They've hired 6 Darkwing's greatest foes to wreak havoc in different areas throughout St. Canard, and Darkwing must subdue each of these criminals in order to find Steelbeak and save the city. So good so far, very simple. 6 bosses, and then you got the final one, the 7th one, in the finale. Now, I'm not going to talk about the 6 individual bosses because effectively it's in that day and age, they were single missions, and they were punctuated at the very end with a boss, which is maybe an extra third bolted on to the level. But I'm going to talk about the very end, the true payoff. I say the true payoff, Dan, because this game didn't allow you to save as you went. So every time you picked up that Game Boy, and hopefully the battery was in it, and it'd last the session, by the way, because sometimes the battery would die.
It would.
And you'd be buggered. But that's a technical term. But because it's fade a little bit, wouldn't it? The colour would slightly go, but it still play. So you did have some warning, but if you take those batteries out, the whole thing turns off anyway. So you're kind of committed once you start the game. Anyway, the point I'm making is you're working through the game. And it's a particularly fun game because it's a side scroller. You know, as I mentioned before, it's an 8-bit game, so there's only so much you can do. It's not 3D. You're bouncing to and from left and right of the screen, jumping. You've got a little shooter, like a pea shooter. You're bouncing on top of things. It's a pretty PG type style game. Your usual 90s fare, but it's really good fun, wholesome fun. However, the final boss level, apparently, as I think about things, this is in my subconscious, is one of the most frustrating, but I think one of the most enjoyable, and it comes in 2 stages down. So, unlike the other levels where you can go off screen and you can push the screen as you go left and right across the level, you're in a very confined space in this boss level. You're in a tower, a glass tower, and there's little room to maneuver. So it's the space literally of the screen, which is very big. So you've got to avoid spinning death discs who will seek you out as you're side scrolling that platform. And they will actually like a homing missile. So if you don't shoot them early enough, you run out of space and you actually can't get the angle of your gun. So they end up churning you up. You've only got, I think it's 3 different lives here. Now, in between missing these drills of death, you need to shoot these 2 little light panels, very small pixels, where the main baddie, Steelbeak, who's behind all of this, is sat behind too, whilst he's watching you try and avoid being diced up as a bit of fried chicken. He's relaxing, watching your impending death, sitting in a chair behind a bulletproof piece of glass. However, if you manage to avoid these spinning discs, shoot them quick enough, and then hook on to these rings, which are just hovering in the air, because again, it's poor graphics, and you bounce from each reach, and you manage to hit one of these glass lights, and you shatter them, it then completes that part of the section, goes on to the final showdown. But it took many, many attempts to even get to that point, because you've got to work out the timing, the angle of these discs. As I say, you've only got 3 lives. And I like to think as a young 7-8-year-old Alex, I had the dexterity, the fingers, to be able to work out those button mashing. It's really only just one button, isn't it? And a directional pad on a Game Boy. Not very convoluted. No triggers as we have now on modern gaming, just really 2 inputs. But it was quite difficult because you had to kind of work out the rhythm and the direction and make sure you had plenty of time to shoot these bulbs. Anyway, but once you do that, which is a minor achievement itself, and again, remember, Dan, if you died, you started all the way back from the beginning of the game, which could have been 45 minutes ago. Annoying. I ain't got time for that. So you really, really got to take your time and know what you're doing. But once you do that, Steelbeak gets up out of his chair and goes, look, I'm not having any of this. I'm going to throw down. And it ends up being hand-to-hand combat, Dan. So with Steelbeak, which looks like this oversized rooster, this murderous rooster. And what he does, he runs at you from side to side of the screen. And what you do is you need to time your jumps between these charges. And he's got this almost like this Roman shield. So if you try and shoot him, it just bounce off. But if you don't shoot him, eventually he'll get up, get bored, and they'll throw the shield at you. So you've got to jump above that shield and then you shoot him between that and then him charging you again. So it's not an awful lot of time. Again, it's all about the rhythm. But there's plenty of times that I died to get to that rhythm because again, you don't get saves, let's just say. And the only way of really killing him is the most honourable way down of killing someone is in the back. So he runs past you, you jump over him, you shoot in the back. But if you do this, I think it's about 6 times. The guy's fried chicken, he's dead. It's happy days. You've saved a day, and you can enjoy a bit of 8-bit animation at the very end. Before then, the credits roll. So all of that about 5 minutes worth of, if you get your timing right, 5 minutes worth of activity, maybe 3 minutes, and you're treated to, I don't know, 45 seconds worth of 8-bit animation, and that's the game. That is it. Turn off your Game Boy. Next time when I go and play it, turn it back on again, and you rinse and repeat. It's beautiful. But this is the thing. It was a very much simpler time, Game Boy, and you didn't need complex or convoluted titles. You didn't need loads of inputs. You needed a directional pad. You need one button for the action, maybe one button for a jump, and that is it. And Darkwing Duck was very simple, left to right, up and down on almost like an old kind of Super Mario type style thing down. And then you got a pea shooter, and that's it. And I loved it. Darkwing Duck is cool as F to look at. He's a good looking character. He's very, very, very cool as a port to game. But the ultimate payoff was a very difficult boss fight. Took me many hours to get there, but when you did it, you really earned it. And that is why, Dan, that is one of my most favourite all-time gaming bosses. Harks all the way back to 1992 on the Nintendo Game Boy.
All about hard work, persistence, and patience.
And this is the thing, I will talk about those things actually in my next game, but specifically perseverance. But yeah, back in the day, games taught you other things that you need for life in general. And sometimes those lessons can be very difficult because your batteries die at the very end of the game and there's nothing you can do about it.
Absolute killer.
But there we go. So yes, straight out of the ballpark, and it's 1992. How about you? What have you got, Dan?
Let's kick things off with 1998's Zelda: Ocarina of Time.
Okay. You stayed on the main track here, but that's not a bad thing because that game's absolute quality. Have you seen? Slightly off tangent. Sorry, I know you're about to go into this, but very quickly, have you seen the remaster? So someone has digitally redesigned the whole game in Unreal Engine, I think it's 5. Have you seen this?
Yeah, it looks banging.
It looks beautiful. I don't know if it's ever going to be properly commissioned, but it looks wonderful, Dan, doesn't it? It looks like
it should.
It looks like a modern title. I guess it is because you're using modern tech, but it just looks so gorgeous.
But anyone unfamiliar with Ocarina of Time, the story of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time revolves around the Gerudo King and evil wizard Ganondorf's rise to power and the hero's quest to defeat him and bring peace to the land of Hyrule. So I'm going to kick things off with the very first boss you encounter in the game. Just think it's a nice starting point. Queen Goma. Now, Queen Goma was a parasitic armoured arachnid.
Yes, I remember this one.
Yeah, located in the Great Deku Tree. So that's it, really. There's no clues behind where you locate this thing. It's literally you're inside a tree, you go around, and you find chests. You start to unlock things. You get keys to open up other rooms, and I think you unlock the fairy slingshot.
Yes, you do.
Yeah. The Queen Goma will initially climb on the ceiling. Once there, she just lays eggs, and you have all these little Goma larvas come at you. So this isn't one for the faint-hearted if you're scared of spiders.
No.
Nice episode to hit up there. It's our episode about phobias a couple of years ago.
Really good one. I'll put it into the description below. That's a good shout down.
Once on the ground, Goma will attack by lurching upwards and falling. Once she's fallen, that's when she becomes vulnerable. Now, you can either hit her in the eye with a Deku Seed or with the fairy slingshot, to which she'll be stunned, and then you can attack her with your dinky little Kakiri sword. So, nothing difficult, Just a nice entry point into the game. And of course, the bosses get harder as you go along. But I've got an honorable mention for
Oh yeah.
Zelda. It was a mini boss, actually. It wasn't one of the big main bosses, but do you remember the Water Temple? It was like the third temple you enter as adult Link.
Yeah, I think I found this one quite frustrating.
Yeah, I think
Um,
most of us did. It was the worst temple of the lot.
yeah, I think I remember as young Alex having to go into Croydon. I lived in South Croydon. For those who don't listen to the podcast, get the bus into Croydon, go to WH Smith's because that was a thing back in the day, and I used to have to search out um, a glossy booklet. It cost quite a lot of money, like 30 quid, and
Mm.
it basically was a walkthrough. And it told you what to do at each part of the game, each temple, how to do it, and the best strategy. These days, of course, you just go onto YouTube and you just Google someone else bloody playing the game or
Yeah,
someone else has written it
100%.
out. But yeah, back in the day, you used to have to go into a bookstore and purchase an actual almost thick book that actually had pictures and images and told you how to do it. And I had to buy one of those really embarrassing. But for those who play it, and Dan, you must know how difficult this game was. It didn't really tell you too much. It just made you kind of guess how to make your way around Hyrule. I had to buy that book to actually make my way through the game because I just got stuck so many times. Like, well, what do I do here? Have I got enough of these things? Have I got enough of those things? Where do I find that? It's hidden. I ain't got time for that. So yeah, I got through that Water Temple. I think that's actually when the point that I bought this book. So I got so frustrated.
Mm. It was
Um,
just like one room that was really hard to get to or find. And then when you sort of figure out, you go, fucking hell, that was
yeah.
so simple. But yeah, no, that's a good point, actually. I'm just going to sort of go on a tangent here for a second. You talk about having to go to WH Smith or
Mm.
HMV to get one of these guides. The other way you would do it, because we were only like youngsters back then, you'd go to school and find out from your mates, which is always a good way to, pass around your knowledge. Or you would have to buy something like Games Master
Yeah.
or one of the magazines, a little bit cheaper. But then when they're breaking down the walkthrough, you probably would have had to buy an entire year's worth of magazines by that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Really
Um,
annoying, but yeah.
or alternatively, Dan, you circumvent all of that and you give it to a mate. They complete it and they give it back to you a week later.
Yeah, that
And that is
happened.
that is what I did with GoldenEye. I gave my save file to my mate. He did a speed run all the way through the game to unlock all of the cheats. You know, the dual wielding AR, whatever they are, assault rifle, silver guns, DK mode, the big head, paintball mode, all of that because I couldn't bothered. And he gave me my save file back, and I was ready to go.
I'll talk about be on my next game.
Mm.
But yeah, sort of going back to the Water Temple, the mini
Yes.
boss was Dark Link.
Ah,
Literally,
yeah.
you go into this room, and I'm sure there was like a tree in the middle of it. It was almost like a mirrored, sort of watery room. And there was like this dark mirror version of yourself.
Mm.
And every time you attacked, it was like an almost mirror of what you were doing. And you had to just catch it in the right way to defeat it. And I think it was only like 3 or 4 hits to defeat him. But yeah, I always used to find that quite fun. I would drag it out for as long as possible because I was having so much fun trying to destroy Dark Link. I was like, do you know what? I'm going to drag it out. If I hit my sword and his hits mine, that's great fun. I know. Ridiculous. I wasted so much time just doing that mini boss. It probably distracts me from the absolute frustration trying to get to the main boss.
Yeah.
Can't remember what the main boss was in the Water Temple, but I just remember you had to get the blue tunic, you had to get the iron boots so you could sink underwater, you were able to breathe and all that stuff. But yeah,
Such a quality game, isn't it? And
so
I don't know
good.
how people remembered the tunes on the ocarina, but if you played it a certain tune, it would do a certain thing. You may learn a tune the other side of the map, but you wouldn't be able to use it until you got to the other side of the map at this very random, very niche looking crack in the wall that would open up into it. Yeah, it's just genius. The game's genius. It's just, yeah. It's a wonderful title and a good shout down, actually. The War's Temple and that game
Hmm.
was brilliant.
I think before you fight Ganondorf, there was the last temple. It was in the Garuda Valley, and you had the mirror shield, and
Yeah.
the boss was like firing. I think one was fire and one was ice. And when the fire one shot its blast at you, you had to sort of deflect it to the ice one and vice versa.
Mm,
It was clever. It was genius. But what a game! I think we talked about it in favorite computer games.
yeah, it's absolute beauty. And I would recommend anyone who hasn't seen it to go and have a look at the fan made remaster. I mean, the shadows on that is just absolutely beautiful. The glow
Mm.
of your fairy. Oh, it's a lovely looking game.
We'll be talking about it again in a minute when we hit the listeners. But yeah, that's my first one, an honourable mention. My next one, um, I've also got an honourable mention, but I've got so much in my notes for the honourable mention. I'll just make it my third. So yeah, what's your second one, Alex?
This is still keeping with 1992 and the Game Boy, but this one's called Super James Pond.
Wasn't he like the frog or something?
There was,
An ilk?
yeah, there was a frog version. This one's the fish,
Ah, the fish. That's right.
but it's all a play on words based upon, of course, the titular super spy James Bond. But this is James Pond, and it's a sequel to the original, which was James Pond. This is Super James Pond, and the plot, Dan. Well, this one you have to take with a pinch of salt. But I'll read through anyway. Although Acme Oil Company has been destroyed by James Pond in the prior game, his arch enemy Dr. Maybe survived and has retreated to the North Pole, where he's taken over Santa's workshop. Now, Dr. Maybe is holding Santa's workers hostage. They mostly are penguins, and have turned many of Santa's helpers into his own twisted and dangerous assistants. James Pond is recruited to infiltrate Santa's grotto, free the captive penguins, retrieve the stolen toys of the children of the world, and defeat Dr. Maybe once and for all. This time, however, due to the greater risks involved in the mission, James Pond is given a robotic suit and the code name RoboCod.
Amazing.
Genius. Now, this suit gives James Pond superhuman strength and agility, as well as enabling him to stretch his midsection almost indefinitely and reach otherwise impossible high areas. Now, the reason Dan why I've chosen this one and being one of the best bosses is single-handedly taught me perseverance. You talked in the previous one, Dan, about how patience and the rest of it, and you really did have it with this game. Because in the lead up to the main boss, and there are quite a few different and difficult stages, you need to scale what is actually quite a challenging castle. It goes way off the screen. The slightest miscalculated jump can mean the end of the game. Because by this point, I mean, if you remember, you're about 40 minutes through. There's no save point. You may have no lives at this point if you had a particularly bad run. So you could be facing this with no lives in a single playthrough at the very end. And this castle is bloody difficult because in some N64 games, they didn't really code it properly. So you may be able to jump onto something, but that something would look exactly like everything else. It could be a background, it could be a door frame, it could be a piece of brickwork, but you wouldn't actually know whether you can interact with it because there are limitations to what an 8-bit game can show. So you may try and jump onto something, think you can jump onto it, and you can't. You plunge to your fishy death. So every playthrough or every time you use a life, you learn this level by every single bit of intricacy. Anyway, you eventually get through this castle. You're jumping up on the turrets. You're avoiding patrolling evil snowmen. Of course, there are evil snowmen. Why not? And as I say, making impossible jumps, which need to be perfectly timed. If you get through all of that, and by this point you are looking at about the 45, 50-minute time period, you're then met with the biggest motherfucker of a teddy bear that you've ever seen. Now, this teddy bear, it takes up the whole screen, and he will slam himself down to the ground. If you're underneath it, you'll become squished. So you got to learn to dodge, jump, and to dive bomb your way through that big bad. But once you do that, you're on to the final boss, which is the evil snowman. Saying this out loud sounds absolutely insane. But anyway, there's a decapitated snowman down. You've got no head, and the head floats and bounces around the screen, chasing you like a murderous homing missile. So as you're trying to outsmart and outrun this head, again, you've got to dive bomb the torso, jump out of the way, and whilst you're being chased. And it's all about timing, it's all about rhythm. It's all about, at this stage, you've got worn fingers, you've got calluses on your thumbs. It might be a bit sweaty because it's quite difficult to get to this point. But once you get that and you repeat it 3 or 4 times, happy days, the witch is dead, and the credits scroll. But to that point, it took a lot of effort and a lot of time, a lot of perseverance, but the payoff was phenomenal because it was in 2 parts, right? You had almost like a semi-boss to get you teed up, but he was still quite difficult to get through. Then you had the snowman, who really had nothing to do with the whole story whatsoever. But anyway, there's a massive snowman that you got to kill. And because it's so big, because these bosses got so large, your little fish for about 3 pixels, it really did give you satisfaction back in 1992 to finish this game. And it's a wonderful, wonderful ending to what is quite a difficult game, actually, because you can stretch off screen. If you stretch too far, you can stretch into a spike. It'd be too late for you to be able to like retract yourself and you die. It's almost like a trial and error as you go through a run to know how far you can stretch and where can you reach and where's not worth it and where is to jump and how far to jump. And yeah, Jesus, it's bringing back some post-traumatic stress, but it's it is a really good, challenging title. And as I say, the payoff is a snowman that you got to dive bomb his torso to escape the murderous decapitated head. But if you get through that absolutely bonkers storyline and boss battle, it's a quality title. Yeah, that's it. Super James Pond.
Lovely. I remember it. God, the 90s. Simpler times.
It was. I mean, I never played the original. I think I was drawn to that particular game because I'm a James Bond fan. I've talked about this on the podcast before, and even on the weekly roundup days. You know, well, we both are Bond fans, aren't we?
I still remember how distraught you were when I told you that Sir Roger Moore had passed away in 2017.
That was a Mandela effect for sure.
Yeah.
Did we go and see No Time to Die together?
We did. We did the On the Go episode, and then we did the big review after. Actually, funnily enough, at the time of recording, where we've been dropping our episodes on YouTube, you can now get those 2 episodes as of today.
You can. Alex's subconscious came through in the end again. I was a blood-brain mess at the end of that film, but it's a really good film. Great ending. But yes, I was drawn to the title because I thought, oh, cool, you could be like a super spy running around with a gun. It's not quite like that actually in the Game Boy version, but it's still a good, simple game, and one that I thoroughly enjoyed. And I'll put some links in the description below. You can go onto YouTube. I'm sure there's other platforms available, but why not YouTube? You're going to have a look exactly what I'm talking about. It's very simple gaming, it's very wholesome, but yeah, it's there's a whole end-to-end. I guess it's Let's Play. It's definitely one to go and watch. So yeah, have a look in the links below. But that is my second one.
My second choice is 1997's Final Fantasy VII. Or alternatively, the Final Fantasy VII remake from 2020. So in the original, it's the second boss you encounter called Airbuster. But just to give a bit of a synopsis on the game, I won't go into too much because you can hear me ramble about this in favourite computer games. The game story follows Cloud Strife, a mercenary who joins an eco-terrorist organisation to stop a world-controlling mega-corporation from using the planet's life essence as an energy source. Events send Cloud and his allies in pursuit of Sephiroth, a former member of the corporation who seeks to destroy the planet. So I mean, there's plenty of characters in this game that want to ruin the world.
Mm.
But it's fine. We're going to kick things off with Airbuster. So you find Airbuster outside of Sector 5 Reactor. So Cloud and his merry band of mercs and people that want to save the planet, they're going around Midgar, this big metal pizza dish thing of a city, or cities. It's quite big. Trying to destroy the reactors, which are sucking up the Marco. So we encounter Airbuster outside just before everything kicks off. So Cloud, Barrett, and Tifa are confronted by President Shinra. And he says, "Meet Airbuster, a techno soldier. Our weapon development department created him. I'm sure the data he'll extract from your dead bodies will be of great use to us in future experiments."
Oh, wow.
I mean, the president's not quite there. He's like a hologram. But hey. Actually, no, I'm sure in the original game he was in the helicopter. And then it was in the remake, he's a hologram. It's been a while since I played the original, but still a timeless classic. Now, this is the first time you encounter a battle on a side attack. So you got Tifa and Barrett on one side, and you got Cloud on the other, with Airbuster in the middle. Unlike most opponents, attacks to the back of Airbuster will deal 5 times the normal damage instead of the regular double damage. Now, Airbuster turns to face whoever attacked it last, and he's got some pretty big moves in him. So he had a move called Big Bomber, which would really like damage your characters. Or he'll just like shunt you. And again, not the most difficult of bosses, but on the remake, good God, man. I was there for probably a good 15 minutes, mashing buttons, hacking, slashing, shooting, dropping materia on that bad boy's ass, thunder, and some of his attacks were just brutal. So you go through in the remake and you can take things away from his sort of like AI and his attacks and stuff before you meet him. And actually, do you know what? I don't think it makes much of a difference what you take away from him, because some of those moves from the original game, which is brought into the remake, kicks your ass even more. I mean, thankfully, I did him first time, but yeah, very easy in the original, but in the remake, yeah, not the easiest. But then in the remake, you encounter him sort of about 9 hours in,
Right.
whereas in the original, he's only like an hour or two. So,
And for Final Fantasy, remind me, this is turn taking. You select kind of an attack kind of thing. It's not like real time attacking, is it?
yeah, so in the original it is. In the remake, you literally have to hack and slash, and you can sort of change between the characters, so you can sort of choose.
All right.
Yeah, I mean that's it's quite fun. The remake, it's very much like Guardians of the Galaxy, or the
yeah,
or the Avengers game. Which, talking of the Avengers, I think I shared with you the other day. They've sort of pulled everything now, haven't they? They're going to just drop all the content, and then that's it. They're done with it.
Which I'm surprised they've been plug-in releases and events for this long, to be honest, because I think even what you're left with, which is usually a hardcore community, must have been very, very small. Not minuscule, because much like you and I, Dan, and I like to think that I'm particularly average. I wouldn't say you are, but I'm particularly an average person, an average game, or gamer, shall I say. We spent probably a couple of weeks. You sold yours. I think I logged back in just to get a skin, but never played it. Because I thought, well, if I ever do, then I'll get that skin, because it was like a time sensitive thing to log in and get it. I smashed it for about 3 or 4 weeks. Really good, semi-good, pretty good single player. It was rough around the edges, and I don't think it was the best story they could have played, but it wasn't bad. That was it. There wasn't anything else to it. I think a lot of other gamers felt the same, and the player base dropped off the side of a cliff. So I'm really surprised now, 18 months, 2 years later, that they've still been doing it. So yeah, they've finally rediverted their efforts onto other titles, other games. Um, and yeah, it's been dead and gone and buried now.
If they had followed that sort of linear path of the Final Fantasy VII remake and Guardians of the Galaxy, I think it probably would have been a hit. But it's just they just got greedy. You know, they went against everything they had promised back when they sort of teased it in 2015, 2016 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It was just dog shit, which is sad. It's genuinely quite sad. You know, what they teased originally. It came up in my Facebook memories, actually. I shared it. I was like, I want whatever this is. Sorry, 2015, Dan, but 2023 just called and you don't. So
No. It's just a good example of how you shouldn't be too involved in the hype, because the hype can actually make it a significant disappointment. And if we could just take a quick breather to reflect on the last episode, which I most anticipated 23, I'm already talking about one of the disappointments. It's only a couple of weeks since we did that episode. Forspoken, Dan. So I mentioned this game on the PlayStation 5. It's an interesting parkour, magical, open world type title. It's pretty much bombed straight out the gates.
Another Square Enix game, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
They're not having a good time at the minute. And I think they're going to redivert all of their attention and their efforts and their developers back into the Lara Croft Tomb Raider series, which is brilliant. You know, the storylines are phenomenal. Have you played any of those before, Dan?
No.
Oh,
I need to go on it.
So good.
I played the original Tomb Raider games from back in PlayStation 1 days.
Yeah. No, the latest versions are very, very good. The writing is phenomenal. They're effectively films. People could argue and say, yeah, well, there's lots of quick time actions, a lot of this, a lot of that, but actually it's very polished. It's lots of fun. And you see the character evolve through the titles. I think there's been 3 games since, and they're working on the 4th one of the series. And there really is a marked difference in their abilities, but the storyline continues all the way through. It's a great game. But yes, I think that's what Square Enix are going to have to do, is revert back to what they know and what they do best. Because the last couple of games they've done have been absolutely, well, apart from Guardians of the Galaxy, right? That was quite a good game.
Yeah.
But people don't tend to rave about it. I don't know why. Maybe because I still got a bitter taste about the other Marvel game that you just mentioned that I won't again. But yeah, Forspoken bombed. And you knew there was a problem because I think a couple of days after I mentioned it on Most Anticipated, people on YouTube were saying they hadn't received their early codes, their early access. And that's usually given to press and to YouTube channels to do early impressions and early reviews. They'll do an embargo and say, well, look, here's early access to the game, but you're not allowed to release a video till XYZ. They didn't give them early access whatsoever.
Oof.
And you know that's bad because they don't want to impact their pre-orders. Because once you're pre-ordered, I mean, you're pretty much set then. The release day comes and thank you very much in their pocket. Whereas if people are bombing your game, people just take their money away and obviously they don't get the cash on release day. So yeah, I don't know how much that's going to affect them, but it's going to be quite significant. And it's already a disappointment, Dan.
Oh man.
But just around the corner again from recording, just under a week, we've got Hogwarts Legacy. Fingers crossed. Let's see if Warner Brothers can put out the bag.
I'm still going to be busy playing the PS4. To say, still making my way through the Final Fantasy VII remake. I think I'm about a third of the way through now, given that a lot of players seem to complete it in 28 hours. I'm about 9-10 in. Actually got a mixed review. The remake.
Oh, right.
A lot of people that love the original as much as I did were like, well, it's a shit because it's not quite true and all that stuff to the original. You've sort of sidetracked. But then if you want a glorious game, I love it personally because it's fleshing out, in particular, the Midgar section of Disc 1 from the original. Oh God. Do you remember actually some games back then were so big they had to spread it over X amount of discs?
Yes. I first came up against one of those when I was on the Sega Saturn, and there
Mm.
was a particular game, I can't remember what it's called now, and it's based on a space station. And it was abandoned, and you wake up and you don't know where you are, and it's one of those kind of creepy, abandoned, deep space things. And I think there was 6 discs. 6 discs down. I mean,
Jesus.
that's bonkers. I mean, the game looked beautiful for the time, but yeah, 6 discs. So
Mm.
that was the only game I did have, which was across multiple discs. But yeah, there was 6 of the bad boys.
Yeah, Final Fantasy was classic for it. So Final Fantasy 7 had 3.
That's a lot.
Final Fantasy 8 had 4. That's I don't know how many 9 had, to be honest. By the time you get to the PS2, I think the discs sort of only went down to like 1 or 2, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, those were the days. You get to a certain point in the game and it'd be like, insert disc 2. And you go, yeah, all right, then crack on.
Yeah, I can't remember which game it was, but I had that for the 360, and it said take out disc. Effectively put disc 2 in. I was like, it didn't come with a disc 2. It's like one disc. What are you talking about? And I hadn't come across this in years. So I took the game out, and it paused on the screen. Because if you take discs out, it doesn't just turn off the console; it just kind of freezes. I picked up the disc for disc tray and thought, what's he talking about? Flipped it over, and again, there was disc 2. There was part 2 effectively on the other side. So all you had to do was flip the disc. So you didn't have a second disc. It just wrote on both sides. Put it back in, close your tray, and off you go.
Great
Really
stuff.
odd, though. Really odd.
I do have an honourable mention for Final Fantasy VII, but
yeah.
there's so much in my notes. As I said earlier, I'm going to make it my third choice. So we'll move on to that after you've discussed yours.
Okay. Quick maths. 5 years later, Nintendo 64.
Here we go. Now we're
Quality,
talking.
a quality console, much revered through the ages. This is the granddaddy of dogfighting and Star Wars games. This is Star Wars Rogue Squadron.
Oh, great game.
Quality game.
So good.
I mean, everything from the iconic sounds and the iconic scenes of Mos Eisley, and you had the bonus missions of the trench runs, and you could unlock other starships, so Naboo fighter from episode 1, Phantom Menace, and other things. It wasn't actually, because Phantom Menace came out in 2001, but you could. I think it was in a latter Rogue Squadron game. I think that one was on the GameCube. No, but you still could unlock other planes based on objectives. Much like GoldenEye, if you did like a speed run, you'd unlock certain things. It was the same for Rogue Squadron. And this was really the first time that they really brought that kind of experience into the home, because it tended to be those types of games you'd find down at the pier, down at the arcades. And it's not really a place to really get engrossed in gaming, is it? Because you've got all the distractions, all the flashing lights, all the sticky fingers, and the sticky carpets, and just arcades have a place, and it's not for that type of game.
No, especially the annoying little kids. Oh, what are you doing here?
Is it my turn
Get
yet?
in the sea. Get in the fucking sea.
Is it my turn yet? No, it's not, because I'm still fucking playing, so shove off and stop watching me. Well, this is an arcade flight action game. Now, this was done by Factor 5 and LucasArts. And the plot is you are a member of Rogue Squadron, and you briefly encounter the Empire Mos Eisley spaceport and Tatooine. The team then executes escort and rescue missions across a number of different planets and the campaign. Now, so far, so good. There are a final set of missions which see you through taking out defenses on the planet, so the turrets, coming face to face with TIE fighters, and the big bad who's behind the latest Empire campaign, a certain Moff Seardon. So Moff Seardon is another type of evil, and he's his transport ship. Now, this is a big grey, to some extent square, hulking thing, but he's in his transport ship, and he's trying to ram me out the sky down. And whilst he's doing this, I mean, this guy, you mentioned the bullet sponge before, and I've got two examples of bullet sponges. This guy is taking your blaster fire. He's loving it. And because in Rogue Squadron, they didn't show you like a health meter, you don't know if you're actually doing any damage to him, but you assume he is. And you're shooting everything you possibly can from your X-Wing at this guy. And as he's trying to blast you, you've got to control the pitch and the speed of your X-Wing, getting out of the way, getting the shots in, and also then dodging TIE fighters who, wave after wave, after you kill them, come in to replenish and support this ailing General of the Skies. But once you get through him, happy days, he goes to his fiery death and you're victorious. But that's only kind of the appetizer, Dan, because it actually leads you on to the final mission. Because you think, as you play that mission, thinking, this is the big bad. This is what my 12, 14 hours have led to. The guy at the end, the guy you always hear over the radio but never see because he's talking from a ship or from a Star Destroyer. I shot him out of the sky, happy days, roll credits. But no. You're transported to the apt and quite lazily titled planet called Calamari. Now, as a sidestep, I love calamari, the crispy squid rings.
Delicious.
If you have a bit of aioli, it goes down an absolute treat. A fantastic appetizer or a main meal if you so intend. A square of lemon, and it's a treat.
Agreed.
But what it isn't is a particularly well thought of name for planets. But the reason why it's called Calamari, I guess, because it's a lush ocean world with the odd island, rolling green hills. And in one of the main parts is a very grey looking, sandy covered city. And you can protect the city down from the TIE bombers and from the TIE fighters, the advanced TIE fighters. So you're having it's essentially a culmination of everything you've learned, as all good, I guess, final acts are. Everything you've learned from the whole game, so dogfighting and how the ships perform. You've got to choose your ships. So you can choose an A-wing to a Y-wing. You mean you wouldn't? To a B-wing, to an X-wing. You can choose anything you want. So it's up to you. They're not going to dictate to you how you play. And the reason being is you don't really need anything specific because all you've got to do is know how to shoot. Because in this mission, Dan, you've got to shoot the X-wings, the TIE fighters, shall I say. And when you've done that, you've then got to then take on what looks a little bit like a sucking, floating Henry Hoover. This thing's on stilts. So if you imagine little Henry Hoovers, 4 of them in each corner of this box, this floating box, and this big Hoover is sucking up the water, and with every minute he's getting closer to the city. So you've got to try and take out this hulking, big, floating death machine as it's coming towards this city that you've been sworn to protect as a rebellion. And it's not a difficult, particular boss. You've got to shoot at each of these mini Henry Hoovers, and then the jets fail and they explode, and you've got to go on to the next one, rinse, repeat. But of course, you can't just hover because X-wings don't fly like that. So you've got to be able to time your runs. And then there's new ways of TIE fighters coming in to shoot you. Then there's ground forces that just appear out of nowhere, obviously, because that's the way that AI is being intended. So you've got to fly back to the city, protect the city, otherwise the shields go and people die, and that's not good. And then go back to the Henry Hoovers and go for another leg. And you do this so many times, and it's quite stressful, Dan.
Sounds it.
But incredibly rewarding and unexpected because, again, you don't expect that level to happen. It's almost like a bolt-on. Maybe it's an afterthought. Because after you kill Moff Seardon, happy days, but it's not. You've still got one final showdown with this bloody Hoover of the water. But once you do that, I mean, that thing, by Jove, does it explode, and it looks great in 64-bit, and there's bits flying around everywhere, and you're flying through the flames. It's happy days, and you feel like you're Tom Cruise in a fighter jet, and it's wonderful. And for me, that's why this has made my third choice, because Star Wars Rogue Squadron for me is the quintessential dogfighting spaceship air-to-air combat game. I don't think there's anything quite close to it. It was executed perfectly. It looked wonderful. It's vibrant. It's colourful. It's true to the Star Wars lore because it's done by LucasArts. So it's proper licensed. It's a proper game. And as I say, at the end, the payoff is phenomenal, but also unexpected because you've got this almost like this bonus mission. But it's free for you to do any way you wish, but you've got to be comfortable that you can fly that damn ship because you're going to be challenged. But when you overcome that final boss, it is a phenomenal, phenomenal title. And it is one of the games actually, and the Rogue Squadron games are always the ones that even after I long completed, I'd go back. And I don't know about you, Dan, but I'd go back and I'd select, I don't know, the Hoth mission where you'd use the snow speeders to trip up the AT-ATs, or I'd do, I don't know, another mission where I'd be in the jungles. You know, I'd go and play those specific missions, or even the valley ones where you're flying with the Y-wings. You got to do an escort bombing run. I mean, it's just so well designed, so well thought of, very well voice acted. The AI was spot on. It was quite challenging, but rewarded you for knowing your ship and your combat. As I say, it's such a good payoff at the end. So yeah, that's my third one. All the way back in 1998, the stellar N64 title, Star Wars Rogue Squadron.
So keeping in theme with Final Fantasy VII, this was my honourable mention. It is a thing called Demon's Gate.
Oh.
I mean, I've not chosen this because I enjoyed it. This is one of those moments where I took my PlayStation memory card into my friend one day and went, I'm sick of this cunt. I need you to do it for me. I've just realised this is the third time ever I've dropped the C-bomb on the podcast. But yeah, it's happened now.
Oosh.
I could have smashed my controller several times. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've defeated him since, especially in my adulthood. Now, you find this guy in the Temple of the Ancients, and Demon's Gate literally is as he's described. He is your gateway out of the temple. He is a big, ugly, demonic head with claws. He comes out, and then you've got to defeat him, and then you can carry on. This is probably the toughest boss the player has encountered yet. And no word of lie, that is true. Now, I've got some tips, okay? I'm still learning things now after all these years. At the tender age of 37, I'm still learning things now. So if anyone's listening to this going, well, Dan, I've struggled with Demon's Gate. I've not defeated him yet, or when I do play Final Fantasy VII, it is really hard. What can you tell me? Well, I can help you out. Now, if you're unable to defeat Demon's Gate due to being a low level, you can return to an area where you fought sort of like a mini boss. It was a red dragon, and you can run around there, make enemies appear, and you level up that way. Good stuff. Now, Demon's Gate is a fast boss with high attack power that uses various attacks, and many of them hurt the entire party at once. And oh boy, this guy can sort of take you out in a couple of moves. His first move is Cave In, which is a nice attack on all your players. Although it can also be used on a single target if all party members are either non-targetable or under the effects of... he uses Slow, Numb, or Petrify statuses. He uses Petrify, which inflicts Slow, Numb on the victor. It's almost like turning your player to stone. So you
Sounds like Monday morning in the office for me, Percy, Dan. But
yeah. Do you have a little like timer over your head, and then like when it runs down, you just freeze?
Always. Without my coffee, that's exactly what happens.
He also has a move called Demon Rush, which is his deadliest attack. But the player can tell when he's about to use that move because he uses it off. Demon's Rush is used 2 turns after Demon's Gate has taken a total of 2,500, 5,000 or 7,500 HP damage. With sense, the player can work out when this will happen. So get a little materia, it's called sense, and you can just see like what the enemy's got left on his thing. So it's not like in some of the games now where they give you like a health meter. You literally had to hone in and go, all right, so he's got 2,500 left. He's going to use that move in a minute. It is possible to poison Demon's Gate. Yeah, it is immune to poison elemental damage. it will constantly deal 0%, so don't bother with that stuff. The only way to see this is via added effect materia, which you can sort of bolt onto other materials. So use your poison materia that way, as any skill that inflicts poison would do nothing. The player can cast slow right away to break Demon's Gate's speed. If you've got your enemy skill materia, use big guards. That will give you a nice barrier. And if possible, use regen to replenish your party's HP. Good way to get through this. As Aerith is in the party, or Aerith, if you're an OG player, her healing limit breaks can also be of great help. Because of Demon Gate's unusually high magic defense, most magic and summon abilities are ineffective, so don't waste your time using magic on this guy. With one exception, so previous to this battle, you would have earned the Bahamut summon. It ignores magic defense and also deals a significant amount of damage. So I'd actually recommend using that straight off. That's a good chunk of his health using that summon materia. The player should stick to using physical abilities, limit breaks, and ordinary melee attacks. It will get you through, I promise. But I say, not the easiest boss and probably the most difficult of Disc 1. Hated it. Genuinely hated it. And even now, I hate him. It makes me feel anxious.
It sounds like there's a real strategy to it, though, in terms of actually getting to know the types of attacks and his, the way in which he would respond at certain levels of the fight. Yeah,
there was also a movie he would do where he would sort of jump up and this big rock would fall on one of the players and it would deal such huge damage. Absolute killer. I mean, I don't think I struggled when I bought the original back in 2019 because I did a lot of side quests and stuff before I got there. So I was sort of a nice level to sort of get through. But yeah, Jesus, as a 13, 14-year-old, I couldn't stand it. And at one point I said I had to give my memory card to my mate to do it for me one evening. He came back, he went, you're a low level. It was fine. Got you sorted. And then when I plugged my memory card back into my PlayStation, there it was, all done. And I was on to the next part of Disc 1.
I've got a question for you, Dan. It's an interesting debate, because otherwise devs wouldn't like to do it. But side quests over main storyline. And sometimes you can find that if you do side quests, you do get that XP, you do get the additional items, inventory, weapons, whatever. That means that when you do go back to the main game, it's a hell of a lot easier. Is that a bad thing? Do you find yourself doing that, or does it depend on the game? What's your thoughts on that kind of way to play a title?
I think it depends on the game. Because when I did the rerun of Final Fantasy VII in 2019, there's the side quest that I did in particular. You go to Wu Tai, and one of your characters steals all your material, and you've got to try and find it. And it's actually quite hard. Some of the enemies there were quite difficult, but probably because of that experience and going through that sort of hour, 2 hours of that side quest, actually made me stronger to be able to sort of carry on. But then sometimes it sort of takes the challenge away from the main story. I don't know. I feel mixed about it.
Yeah, because as you say, it can teach you how to play the actual game, and perhaps, I don't know, we haven't paid attention to the intro mission or the the instructional section, and it's a safety blanket whilst you enjoy and take on story. There's times where I have smashed through because I've enjoyed it so much. I've sorted out all the side quests, and when I've then started the lower level, first third of a game, I'm flying through it. It does take something away from it because actually you don't quite spend the same amount of time during the way which the devs designed it to, because you're not thinking about something, or you're not you kind of used to every game's got a way which is going to be played, right? It's got like a vibe. I'm not sure if I'm really explaining myself properly, but if you pick up a title and you play enough of it, you kind of know how that game is to be played. There's
Mm.
like there's like a yeah, it's like a vibe, and it's unique to that game. And I guess the devs don't assume that you know about that vibe at that point in the game. Whereas if you do all the side quests, you kind of know what to expect. You kind of know the way the AI works, because there's a rhythm, or there's a formula, or it's a power of three, because of course games love power three, don't they? There's all those kind of things. So you tend to smash through those early levels really quick, because you kind of know what to expect, that you wouldn't usually get until much later. And I have found that I've kind of taken something away from it.
Mm.
But on the other hand, I find that by doing the side quests, you then are able to unlock some of the cooler stuff early on. So there was stuff that, by the mid to end game, you only just have enough money or credits or experience or this or that to be able to get the cool thing that you've always wanted.
Yeah.
And you kind of regret then not spending the time doing those side quests, because you could have used that cool thing earlier on. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
It's a real tight kind of payoff between do you ruin the game longer term, but you have some cool shit with you, or do you play it as probably hardcore intended, but then I guess miss out on having a cool experience with the cool stuff, or the cool unlocks, the cool abilities. And it's always one that I didn't struggle with. It's not an existential crisis, but I do always find myself when I'm in that situation. It's mostly with role playing games or large open world games, whether I do one or the other, because there's invariably not really middle ground.
Mm.
Because I find when I start a side quest, there's loads available, I just do them because it's fun. I guess it's that quick payback, isn't it?
Yeah.
You do the quick side quest, smash. Oh, I've completed it and I've got something with a reward. Great, let's go for the next reward, as opposed to the long drawn out storyline or storyline campaign. I don't know. It's an interesting one, guys. Look, as you're listening, are you team side quest? Or are you team storyline campaign? Let us know. Get in contact, because it'd be interesting to see which side of the fence you guys sit on.
Could be a future episode, isn't it?
Most definitely.
So who's your next choice, Alex?
The deathmatch of the late noughties, Dan. One of the best first-person titles of modern times, in my opinion, is Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Did you play this one?
A lot. I was never really a Call of Duty person. I know you and your friends are. Yeah, I never really got into it. When did it come out?
This was 2000 and I want to say 8.
I think I would have missed this anyway, especially when online gaming was really sort of becoming a thing then. I'd gone to university for a year. So I missed out on all this stuff. Unfortunately, I imagine if I hadn't gone to uni, then I probably would have picked this up and got involved with my brother and my friends and all that stuff. My brother
2009.
was
2009, Dan.
Oh, okay. So it would have come out. Oh, yeah. I was always a FIFA person, to be honest. But yeah, or an RPG. But yeah, anyway, Alex, Modern Warfare 2.
Yeah, it's a really good game, and the multiplayer was really good fun, but it's now a grind. So I don't really play COD titles for multiplayer. I play it for the single player storylines, and they're like action films basically. They're really, really good, and this one's no different. And I won't spoil it, because I think at some point maybe you should play it. I don't know, Dan, if you can get into it. But anyway, you go through lots of iconic missions, and each of the missions, I say, are like mini films. They're so well written, well directed. They looked good at the time. And this particular part of the game, I'm probably spoiling it for some people, but tough. It's been out for so long, you can't have a go at me. 13, 14 years. Is that long? Yeah, it's a while now.
Yeah.
So you're on a rig, an inflatable rig, and you're chased by helicopters and by men. You shoot them, you survive. Happy days. Then you come to a waterfall. You're chasing basically some real evil bastard. You're on this waterfall. You jump out of your boat, out of the waterfall into the water. It's all first person. And then as you're clawing yourself out, it's all by, I guess, interactive cutscene. You're clawing yourself out of the water, you're spluttering, you're trying to grab your breath, you're in a dust storm. Can't see much more than a couple of meters in front of you. An orange haze has descended. It's quite claustrophobic because you can't really see what's going on, but there's people clawing around, there's dead bodies, there's all manner of chaos going on. And the guy, just in the distance, as you come towards him, is who you've been hunting for the latter part of the game. The big bad. Someone who you trusted, Dan. General Shepard. General Shepard was all part of the good guys. He was the leader of this elite force of the US army, and he ended up being the big baddie. He was an asshole. He was an all-round bad egg, and actually left some of your best characters, some of your best mates of the series in a ditch to burn like a crispy schmore. He wasn't a very good guy. Now, all you got, Dan, is a knife on you. You haven't got your guns, you haven't got anything, because you just come off a waterfall, right? You're not going to have your weapons on you. And you go on a hand-to-hand combat. This guy, he hasn't been out of the waterfall. He's waiting for you, so he does best you. And he stabs you. So there's red jelly all over the screen. You're pretty much, you think you're on your way out. You're not sure whether you've done something right or wrong at this stage, but you know shit's getting real. And he's monologuing, because all baddies do, and they're saying, look, this is the end of you. Ha ha ha, you couldn't beat me, blah, blah. No one remember you, all that kind of stuff. And he ends up, one of your, I think it's Captain Price, who's another main character of the series, comes off screen, tries to take him down, and he's being pummeled down. Bare knuckled into the ground. He's going to lose the fight. He's going to die. So in one last final attempt with a bit of quick time action, you grab this knife that's plunged into your chest. You're very slowly, by button mashing, pulling this dagger out of your chest. And with a great level of timing and dexterity, you knife throw, like the finest knife throw you'd find at a circus. You throw your dagger straight into the mustache-wielding face of the evil general, and he's dead. He's brown bread. And he saved your down member of your team who's being pummeled into the next generation of console gaming. And you saved the day. And this is the interesting one. I chose this main boss because although you don't have to do any kind of hard work to get to that point, because it's all pretty much on the rails, you may move forward very slowly because, again, you're half dead. You don't have a gun. You don't shoot. There's no kind of real accuracy to it. They're all button mashing or quick time events. The way you did just enough to make you feel that payoff, because you feel like you're part of an interactive film. I think actually it was quite a nice way of finishing off what's quite a stressful campaign. And there's lots going on. Every level it's a big affair. It's blockbuster. So to finish off on a slower paced but still quite quality, high noted end, I think is phenomenal. And it's straight out of the 90s action film playbook. It looked great. It felt great. You get the revenge at the end. And you do just enough to make it feel like you didn't just sit through 5 minutes of CGI action. You actually had a part to play, even if you didn't do too much. Because by this point, you've got, again, calluses on your thumbs. You've done speed runs. You got all the achievements for not killing people or going through a level as quiet as you possibly can or doing this or that. It's quite nice to sit back and let the game take you through to the end. And Modern Warfare 2, I think, did it perfectly, because not many games kind of did that. You have to work hard to get to the end. And not to say that you didn't work hard at the very end, but those earlier missions are quite difficult. They're high octane, high pressured, very quick. They do require you to be very fast on the triggers. So when it came to the ending, you could enjoy the pace, the finale. And it's such a great finale because this guy has killed your team or killed Ghost. He's burned him alive in a ditch. Everyone's been suffering at the hands of this guy who had your back or seemingly had your back. And you get to teach him a lesson at the very end. It's a very good finish to what is a fantastic title. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. I mean, I played it on the Xbox 360. It was available on the PlayStation 2, 3? PlayStation 3, I guess, at the time. It's a quality title. I can hugely recommend it. But that is my penultimate title on my boss title
Nice.
of the episode.
This is my final one.
Mm.
Let's go to 2018.
Okay.
Spider-Man.
Oh yeah.
As I mentioned in the previous episode, very, very lucky boy. You upgraded your PS5 and you gave me your PS4 for my birthday / Christmas last year.
There you go.
And Spider-Man was the first games I bought. $17.99 on the PlayStation Store with
Bargain.
all the side quests. Bargain.
Absolute bargain.
Let's just kick it off with the first boss.
Oh yeah.
Because it's so unexpected. Kingpin.
Yeah.
Like straight off the bat, you're fighting basically the biggest villain in the Spider-Man world. Kingpin.
So literally, once the starting credits have rolled, you're into it, aren't you, Dan?
Yeah.
I never expected it.
It's just so unexpected, so off the cuff, and you're going, wait, shouldn't this guy be like the
very last one?
Very last boss? No, straight off. Obviously, as you're sort of building up to getting to him, you're learning sort of the Spidey's combat and traversal skills.
Mm.
And your first task is go and give the police a hand outside Fisk Tower, tackle the enemies there, and then follow the waypoint into the building. And then you sort of fight off of all these bad guys, these mercs, and God knows what. And then you encounter the boss fight with Kingpin. But he's got turrets.
Oh, he does, doesn't he? Yeah. Are they in the pillars? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So to take down the turrets, look towards one. They're sort of built, as you said, built into the pillars, and you have to mash R1, which is where you shoot your webbing. So it's rapid fire webbing, and it tangles it up. And then you have to keep dodging the other one. And when you have a free second, press both L1 and R1 to grab the webbed turret, like you would a piece of debris, and then you throw it.
Mm.
Repeat for the other one. Now it's time for some hand-to-hand combat with the big man. He'll counter your standard attacks, so you need to web him up like you did with the turrets. So you have to mash R1, and then he suddenly sort of gets stuck, doesn't he? When he's properly webbed, you can then get a full combo off by pressing triangle, which is the... you yank yourself over towards him, and then prompted, but then back away before overdoing it, because otherwise he kicks your ass.
Yeah, you've got to do a couple of well-landed, timed hits. As you say, if you get too overzealous, he'll whack you, and then that takes a chunk of life off. It's not worth it. So yeah, a couple of hits, and then you've got to pull back and wait for the because he charges you, doesn't he? Doesn't he try and charge you? So you've got to kind of jump over him, web him as he does it, and then rinse, repeat.
Yeah, at some points he actually calls more men in, and then you have a fairly large number of enemies to work through. And I think you get some of those douches with the shields as well, which are quite hard to defeat. You've got to sort of jump over them and attack them from behind. Very common actually in a lot of games now. They seem to have shoehorned them into Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Oh, right.
So you have to sort of like you can't jump in Final Fantasy. You have to sort of parry around them and then sidestep pretty much, then get behind them and slash them that way.
I guess it's I don't know if it's a lazy kind of game design, but it's almost like a 2-stage way to defeat an enemy, isn't it? It just bulks out the encounter, because it's not just a simple case of you've got to mash through their health. You've got to use a bit of tactics to get through the shield, and then they're fair game, aren't they?
Yeah.
And you're right in this one. It's quite difficult, but usually you target those first, because they'll ram you, and then you're dazed, and you're a squash spider. So yeah, it's an interesting gaming mechanic, and I do wonder why people introduce them. Is it just for bulking, or is it actually to introduce a challenge or something else?
What I actually found quite impressive, you can, instead of jumping around the room, you can web sling by pushing R2.
Yeah.
So you can sort of get around into space quite fast and focus on the guys with the guns first. Once most of the well-armed enemies are down, you can go back to the Kingpin by webbing him up and attacking, rinse and repeat. Keep an eye on your spider senses and prepare to dodge often. Use throwable objects. Repeat the combos on Fisk and use the triangle and circle prompt as a finisher on him too when the button prompts appear. When he gets critically low, he'll grab you for a mini scene. This was quite cool, actually. So be prepared for some QTEs. When you time those right, remember to press the buttons as the outer circle closes down and hits the smaller inner circle of the prompts, and it'll go down. And I think there's like 4 different sequences. And then if you've timed those right, then congratulations. You've beaten your first boss in Spider-Man.
Within the first 5 minutes of the game, really.
Yeah.
And I think he's one of the most satisfying baddies because he doesn't have any kind of superhero traits, does he? Kingpin.
He's just a big buff guy.
He's just a big guy. He could take a lot of punishment. And I think that's why probably I never really thought of it that way, Dan. But you're right to identify. It's one of the most satisfying ways to start a game because he just takes punch after punch. And as you mentioned, if you can do a really good combo very early on in the game, it's so satisfying to take down one of the most famous kind of nemesis of Spider-Man. And you're just laying punch on punch, dodging very easily. You get into a rhythm. And yeah, when you take him down, it's very, very satisfying. And very early on in the game. It's genius, really.
I need to go back and revisit it because I've not played it since I think last time I played it was Christmas Eve. But I'm still sort of learning the mechanics and the buttons, and I remember sort of hitting some rooftop and there was like a load of bad guys. I was like, oh shit, there's loads of them. And they nearly killed me. It's mad.
Once you learn a bit of muscle memory and you unlock some gadgets, you can have an awful lot of fun. It's really good fun.
Because you get different suits, do different things, and it's quite cool.
It doesn't just look good. They can, as you say, they can have different abilities, and it's really interesting to unlock and combine these different things. You have a different looking suit with a different ability. And the other bosses are very, very good. So I won't spoil it, but when you come across Shocker, I think Shocker's next level up from Kingpin. And that is really good fun. So yeah, there's like plenty to look forward to in that game.
So yeah, that was my last one. And then after yours, Alex, it'll be on to the listener.
I can't wait. Well, very quickly then, Dan.
That's goodies.
Gears of War, Xbox 360. Did you play that game at all?
No. Familiar, though. It was quite a big one, wasn't it?
Yeah. So Gears of War was all the way back in, I want to say, 2007, 2006. So late fall 2006. It is a 3D shooter, third-person shooter, storyline driven, and yeah, it's effectively the start of a much larger, what is now series. Developed by Epic Games and published by Microsoft Game Studios, it was the poster boy of the Xbox 360. It launched that console. Now, the game, if you haven't played before, like you, Dan, it sees you controlling Marcus Phoenix, who's a big hulking man. Looks like he spent most of his living life in the gym, cramming down protein bars and eating chicken. He's a big guy. It's part of what's called the COG Delta Squad. And it's a very good campaign, and it's very cinematic, and it's a beautiful game to watch. And it's post-apocalyptic. But your final act is to take control of a big motherfucking bomb. It's called a light mass bomb, which, if done correctly, can end the whole of the campaign, the war that's being raised against you by these hideous, murderous beings called the Locust. These monsters who have been hiding under the ground, waiting for the day to emerge and to start and wage campaign of terror and war across the humans on this planet called Serra. The guy who's behind it is a big hulking guy called General Ram. Now, this baddie is perhaps, I guess, one of the best final showdowns, and it was equally playing it solo as it was playing 4-player co-op. The difference with 4-player co-op is you had other people around you. By that point, you could do it chapter by chapter, but if you did all the way play through, I think it took me about 6.5 hours to play end to end, and that was on the hardest setting. The difference being when you're with 3 other people is it wouldn't be any easier. You'd have, I guess, 4 times the health. So you would not get an easier ride. You had more people. It just means you had to be more coordinated. But General Ram is the focal point, as I mentioned before, of this Locust army, the main guy. And through the campaign, he's been lifting people up and skewering them in front of you and killing people. And he's the baddie who just is always out of reach. Well, you start the final level on a fast-moving bullet train, effectively, Dan, an open air one. And this General Ram, he's not happy to see you because you're trying to end his brethren. You're trying to end the war with this big bomb. And you mentioned about bullet sponge as well. Gears of War is always about how much ammo you can put into these murderous sacks of meat. And Ram takes a lot of damage. Now, unlike most of the rest of the game, which although it's corridor shooter, you do have some space to get behind cover and to move around and flank and do all the rest of this. At this start of the game, Dan, on this stage of the game, you're on a very narrow train carriage, so there's not really many places you can go to. And of course, you could easily fall to your death because you're going so fast along this track. There's not an awful lot of space to traverse, so you've got to be really quick. You've got to know how to cover. You've got to time your shots. Now, this guy, I mean, you need to empty your clips into this near protected baddie because ordinarily in the Gears of War game, you've got the iconic chainsaw bayonet on the end of your machine gun, so you can chainsaw baddies in half, and it's very, gritty and gruesome and blood splattering, and it's oddly quite enjoyable. But you can't do it, Ram, because Ram, almost a bit like in Batman Begins, when Batman is covered and circled by all those bats. Do you know the Christian Bale version? Yeah. Well, General Ram is covered in the same way by these murderous, vampirific, almost bat things. So you can't go hand to hand because you'll just get chewed up. So you've got to choose your shots, throw as much you possibly can into him, and ammo is obviously quite tight because you're on a train. There's not so many places you can get that. And then with the limited amount of frags that you have, throw your grenades, shoo away those murderous birds, those bats, and then lay every single amount of clip you can into him and rinse and repeat. And he'll chase you. So he'll walk very slowly towards you, shooting his own big old shotgun. So you've got shotgun blasts come at you. You've got these horrible murderous bats. If you get too close, they'll chew you up. And you've got to bounce around, rolling into cover. The cover then gets slowly eroded because he's obviously shooting at you. So you get environmental damage. And you can't run away because you're on a very narrow carriage that's going at super light speed down this open air track. And it took me, I don't know, maybe a couple of hours first playthrough to actually defeat him. And it was really quite frustrating. I think a couple of times I had to turn off the Xbox, get out for a pint, and come back another couple of days and have a breather because I just didn't know how to do it. And you couldn't progress the game because there wasn't that was the end of it. It's a very linear campaign, so you can't take a breather, go back into the open world, do a side quest or repeat. You're stuck there. That is it. That's the end of the chapter, end of the game. You've got to do it. There's no turning back. But when you did it, it was phenomenal. And there's a very nice cutscene. And when you ram all the way down his health, there's a lovely cutscene where you end up chucking him off the train, skewering, then give your bayonet. Happy days. Roll the cutscenes. you've saved the day. Now, invariably, you don't because there's a Gears of War 2, 3, 4, and 5 or whatever. But for all intents and purposes, you've got revenge on all of your fallen comrades at the hands of this big bad in a very bloody, very bullet-ridden way. And yeah, it's very, very tough, but very, very satisfying at the very end. What a great way to finish off what I think is one of the best games that Microsoft have ever developed. Gears of War, Xbox 360. A beautiful game.
Oof. We've got some more beautiful games here, Alex.
Tell me, what have we got?
So let's hit up with the listeners. First up, we've got Sam and Tommy. We're going to talk about Pokemon first.
Oh, yeah.
So Sam said, Cynthia, Pokemon Platinum, the hardest Elite Four champ that forced me to quit the game in around 2009-ish. Didn't go back to complete it until 2020.
Wow.
That's quite a gap. That's a hell of a gap.
It is.
And Tom actually agreed, said, to be fair, Cynthia is insane. I don't know, I dragged that out. I had to. And Tommy actually said as well, the gym leaders in Gen 2, Silver, Gold, and Crystal of Pokemon, when you go back to the Kanto region from Gen 1, difficulty curve is non-existent by the time you beat the last 16th gym. Your Pokemon are 30 levels higher. Where's the challenge?
And that's kind of what we talked about before, wasn't it, Dan? About, side quests and being overpowered at the point in which you would naturally come to that point in the game.
Mm.
And Pokemon's a really good example, actually, because if you explore, you invariably rank up your Pokemon so much that when you go back to completing those gyms, as they say, it's walk in the park. Because you may not have put all of your effort and time into that Pokemon that's either elemental or it's rock or it's water type. But because you've got to go back to that gym, you may use them more and more. And because you spent more time out in the field, you've got such a diverse range of high-powered different Pokemon that perhaps you haven't kind of focused on, that, you can go back and just absolutely waltz it. But Pokemon's a very good example of that.
Yeah, I haven't actually played against the Elite Four probably for some time. The last time I think I played against them would have been Pokemon Stadium on the N64. You could put your red or blue cartridge into the game and you'd load your Pokemon into it.
I remember it well.
You'd go through all the different stages and then you get to the Elite Four. Yeah, it's been a long time. That would have been 2000.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. I have got Pokemon Scarlet, actually, for the Nintendo Switch. I need to get back onto that and see how I get on. Been a while since I played a Pokemon game, yeah. Back to Sam. He said, the one in Metal Gear Solid who read your memory card and you had to plug your controller into port 2. Do you remember Metal Gear Solid?
I've never been a Metal Gear fan. I know lots of people kind of compared Splinter Cell with Metal Gear because I guess it's a ninja type dude who's in the military. But I didn't have a PlayStation growing up until I was in first year of uni. So that ship had sailed. They're on Metal Gear, God knows what. And I was more of the Splinter Cell kind of offshoot. Not that you can be one or the other, you have to be. But I invariably was. So no, Dan, I never got into it. And I kind of regret that a little bit because I know a lot of people have very fond memories of the very odd but satisfying boss fights. And I never experienced for the reasons you're about to mention. But yeah, never played it, which is a real shame.
The boss that Sam is referring to was someone called Psycho Mantis. Now,
I've heard of this, oddly.
Proceeds to read the actual memory card you have in your system. If you've played any other popular Konami games at the time, which particularly would have been sort of Castlevania, Psycho Mantis will remind you how much you like Castlevania, eventually even commenting on how much you have saved during the game. It's genius stuff. This boss is breaking the fourth wall and is talking directly to you as the player. It's brilliant. I only remember that boss because I used to watch my friends play it. I never actually owned it. I only owned Metal Gear Solid 2. It came part of like a bundle when I got my PS2 when I think I just left school actually. But yeah, great games. Next up, we got Brendan. He says, can't remember the name of the boss, but I launched my controller at Tekken 3 before.
Yeah, Tekken was frustrating as hell.
Never got into them, to be honest.
Yeah, I
think
had
I had a demo.
Virtua Fighter on the Sega Saturn, which is basically just a poor man's version of Tekken, but did play eventually Tekken, and it's much the same. Like it's just it's painful button mashing, and I don't find those games have an awful lot of payoff because it's invariably, I think it's a bit of luck, and then there is strategy to it, but it's just, I think it's personally quite limited. So yeah, I don't. They're not really. It's not really a title that I really enjoy too much.
No.
You can pick it up, have the odd battle, the odd fight, almost like do you ever play Super Smash Brothers on Nintendo?
Yeah.
Quality, because it was colourful, you had power-ups and stuff, but for Tekken or for Virtua Fighter or for, I don't know, any of those titles, it's just not basic because you would chain things together, but it would just be a case of jump, knee, duck, punch and kick, and that's kind of it. I don't know. I wasn't a massive fan of them in the end.
No, same. Next up, we've got Zach. Got a couple here from him. He said, any dragon from Skyrim, what bastards they are. Did you ever play Skyrim? Because I
No.
love this game.
I never got onto the bandwagon, but I know it's been remastered or it's been re-released, and lots of people still have fond memories. It's still played today, and there's still lots that people are finding after all these years. But no, I never got into it, mainly because those games just took so long, and I never really had a long enough period to sit down and take it all in.
Yeah, it does take up a lot of time, especially when I bought, because like I said, they re-release it so many times now. I think I bought it on the re-release, and there were like side quests you could do, and one of them you could actually just build your own house. And I spent hours building this house. It had turrets, it had a library, a weapon room, and God knows what. It was just so fun, so enjoyable. But the dragons, yeah, no, Zach's right. They're a pain in the ass. You could just be minding your own business, and then a fucking dragon will come down and it starts attacking you, and you'd be there for like 20 minutes hacking these bastards. It was satisfying by the end of it. And you drain the dragon's soul, and you sort of collect bits and pieces to create your own armor or whatever. But yeah, pain in the ass. And they said the first Borderlands game's final boss is is shite, a huge bullet sponge, very disappointing. And then they followed that with one of the best bad guys in the computer games, Handsome Jack. I played Borderlands, sort of comic booky style graphics, but it was quite fun. And the boss he's referring to is the Destroyer. It is a massive intergalactic being from another dimension sealed within Pandora. It appears as a gargantuan one-eyed beast with a massive mouth and several tentacles. The Iridians, at the cost of their entire civilization, imprisoned the Destroyer within the vault thousands of years ago. Yeah, I'm sure it took me ages to get through that final boss.
It's so worth it.
Yeah, so worth it. Next up, we got Mikey. Says any Ocarina of Time boss, but the first three Young Link are iconic / nostalgic to me. So as we mentioned, we talked about Queen Goma at the start of the episode.
Oh, yes.
You had King Dodongo, which you'd find in Dodongo's cavern, and he was the fire-breathing lizard, and he would roll around. When he breathes in for his fire breath, you actually had to throw a bomb into his mouth, and when it exploded, he would sort of become stunned, and then when he was stunned, you could attack him because he was vulnerable. It was always like a different take on Queen Goma, which was genius. And then there was Baronade, which is located inside Jabu Jabu's belly. Baronade will have a variety of attacks, including a multitude of giant beery. Sounds like a curry, doesn't it? A giant beery.
Mm.
An electrical laser, as well as quickly ramming into Link. The boomerang must be used in order to stun it, and once stunned, it can be attacked by the Kokiri sword. So again, very similar combat styles for each boss at the start, but yeah, totally with you there, Mikey. He actually gives an honourable mention to the Lich King from World of Warcraft. He says that's iconic, which is pretty apt if this is a podcast segment / title, as Wrath of the Lich King is the current expansion of classic World of Warcraft, was also the expansion with the most WoW subs ever, hitting 12 million subscribers in 2010. We like facts on the topic. Next up, we got Kelly. She says, Resident Evil Biohazard. I wanted to smash the controller into the TV on several occasions on that game. Shovelly Jack, when he turned into the thing with all the eyes, was a monster.
Sounds gross.
Yeah. Did you ever get into Resident Evil games?
Again, no, skipped me because I didn't have the PlayStation 1. I guess by the time I had a PlayStation 2, I kind of missed that hype. I'm not really into horror games. I guess I'm
not. I had a demo of Res Evil 2, which was probably the more iconic of the lot. I didn't like I suppose that fear element. You just wouldn't know what was going to come out of that dark corner or round and come and attack you. I just wasn't a fan. I don't like zombies either, so yeah.
No. We many a time after a night out at the Union, I'd go back to my mate Matt's house and we'd play Fear. Have you ever played Fear before? Heard of it?
I've heard of it. I'm sure this was like quite a big thing amongst my work colleagues.
It's a first-person shooter, effectively, but it's of a paranormal. And the very opening of the game. So by this point, I'm about 6-7 pints in. I should be at home in bed, but invariably, you go home to your mates and you have some drinks and you watch TV or you play computer games. And he worked at Blockbuster at the time. Of course, that shows our age because Blockbusters isn't even a thing now. But he would take the game rental back. He'd get free game rentals. And he played the first 10 minutes of Fear. And I had to leave, Dan. We weren't there very long because you go down a corridor and an empty box down a corridor would just fly at you just randomly. Or there'd be a shadow, or you turn down the corridor and as you move out the corner of your eye, of your vision, something runs. And you go and look and nothing's there. Or a door suddenly slams shut. Proper jump scare stuff. I was like, mate, I'm out. I'm too drunk for this. I can't deal with this. So yeah, it sounds like neither of us are probably Resident Evil worthy. But yeah, it wasn't something that I ever really grew up playing. I guess for the reason that I'm a scaredy cat.
Yeah, same. Same with horror films. Just can't get into them. Some people just love it for the adrenaline rush, don't they? Yeah.
But it's always ever going to end up one way, which is the main protagonist ends up dead. It's usually what you find. So yeah, it's I don't mind the odd horror film, but it's not my genre.
Next up, we got Ray. She's put a little gif of Robotnik.
Oh yes,
classic Sonic villain. A lot of nostalgia there for me, actually. I remember it was Green Hill Zone on Sonic 1. He would be in his little like hovering thing and he had the swinging ball. And you had to sort of evade the ball. You get onto a platform, then you have to jump and hit him.
Yeah.
And every boss level, you had to hit him 8 times and you would defeat him.
Yeah, he was particularly vulnerable in his head, wasn't he? So you'd smash or you'd have to crack his dome, his glass dome on his contraption, his floating thing that had, as you say, these appendages that were appropriate for each of those stages. And it was pretty basic. There wasn't really any kind of complexity. You knew what to expect. Almost you were doing it. You were trying to smash him before you were able to interact with it, as the screen's kind of loading or if he's coming in. So it wasn't difficult, but how you got to him, as you say, either there was a platform or you had to jump. I think one of the was it the Master System version? Because there's different versions of the same game
Yeah,
of Sonic. The Master System version, I think of that one of the latter ones, you had to. I think there was different like mountains that you jumped between or platforms, and you could then fall to your death in the water. And if you timed it wrong, and you could bounce, you could hit him, and then that bounce would allow you to jump the gap and then go onto the middle plinth or the pillar. Um, so you had different ways of interacting with the environment, but ultimately you still just try and bounce off his noggin to kill him.
yeah.
And it's very simple, but still quite enjoyable boss gaming. Yeah, it's a good shout actually. Robotnik is a really good shout.
Oh, do you remember the last one of Sonic 2 on the Mega Drive? He was in a big Robotnik robot thing, but you didn't have any rings in this final level. So the minute you got hit, that was
Oh
it.
yeah,
You
that
had
was
to
it.
you'd carx it and you had to start again. And of course, depending on how many lives you'd used at that point, you could only have two or three left.
Because that could take quite a lot of time to get to that point as well. Because they were
Uh,
quite long levels actually. What was it? 5 or 6 levels per game?
yeah, roughly that. I think there might have been more in Sonic 2.
Yeah.
Sonic 3 and Sonic Knuckles was quite an interesting one because if you put Sonic 3 on the top of Sonic and Knuckles, you had to go through all the levels. But by that point, they'd already sort of introduced this code where it would save your progress,
Oh
which
yes.
was quite good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember the final boss of that, you had to fly through space as Supersonic, dodge asteroids, and then try and kill Robotnik in his big robotic armor that way, which was really cool. But I remember spending an entire summer one day. It took me about 2 or 3 hours to get there.
Mm.
Long-winded if you're a kid. But yeah,
Oh yeah.
Robotnik's a good shout.
Many a plenty of summer summery warm days spent inside, not outside enjoying yourself, getting some fresh air, but inside button mashing very tiny controllers on a SCART cable attached to a rear projection TV. But they were very simple, wholesome days.
Mm. And finally, we've got Chris with another iconic boss, King Koopa.
Oh yeah.
I, I mean, I wasn't really a Mario kid until I got the N64. So Mario 64, I remember you had to get behind him,
Mm-hmm.
grab him by the tail, swing him
Yeah,
around,
yeah.
and then lob him at the bombs around the platform. The only memory I have before that was on the SNES with Super Mario World. I don't remember fighting him, but I remember fighting his kids on the way across the map.
All right.
And they were like different way. They all did something different. You had to defeat them in different ways, which was quite cool. But yeah, great shout for King Koopa. Any memories for yourself on King Koopa?
Only as you say, Mario 64 and grabbing him by the tail, but he's always been quite a boss because he's obviously quite big anyway, and Mario's always quite a small guy. Um, yeah, so it's quite physically imposing as a character, and obviously very strong. So he's a great shout, and he's just quite a classic. I think he always transports between the ages. That sounds quite a daft thing to say, but if you look at it as all the way from the Game Boy to the 64, then to the Switch, you always get an appreciation of just how big and bad he is. He's never been downplayed in the title, and you always get the sense, regardless of what decade you're playing, he's the real deal. And he's such a good baddie because he's got the presence. He's not really evil. He's a bad guy, but it's PG race, isn't it? It's a Mario game. But he's kidnapping people and he's causing things to become bad. He's just the right amount of evil, I think, for a baddie. He's an all-round great character.
Agreed. We've had a podcast idea sent in to us,
Oh, right.
but I think it's going to be pretty much. I'm just going to bolt this on as a question for this episode. Iconic or best game original soundtracks? Ocarina of Time and Skyrim had bangers in soundtracks. Quite easy for me. I'm going to agree. Ocarina of Time is a classic.
Yes.
I'm going to throw in Final Fantasy VII as well because I love the soundtrack. I think I talked about this in favorite computer games, and actually, I've been really enjoying like the reworked versions and the remake. Every now and again, you sort of get the song. You're, oh yeah, I remember that. I prefer the original, but say the reimagined versions are very, very good as well. But yeah, nice and easy for me. So those two.
I am going to go for the absolute belter of a classic, Halo 3. And there's two tracks from the Halo 3 soundtrack, OST, and that is the loading screen, which is the the chamber type music, the throaty.
I don't quite know what happened there. I don't know whether it was the internet line, but your voice went really weird and sort of alienated.
That was me singing. And then you've also got the upbeat tempo panic music, the big band as you're getting off the planet that's exploding behind you as you're on the Mongoose, the four-wheeled army vehicle, as the whole place is falling to bits and you're jumping through the sky. That soundtrack is phenomenal. So yeah, for me, it's the Halo 3 OST all the days. It's phenomenal.
Nice. What a way to round up that episode.
Oh yes, good question as well.
Yeah, definitely. I just don't think we'd get away with it doing it as a podcast episode. And to be honest, I don't know if we'd be allowed to use the music or not because we'd probably get cancelled. Someone would come after us and be like, you broke copyright law. We want your dollar bill, y'all.
And we ain't got any.
I ain't got none. I can't risk it. But that rounds up this episode. Next up, we're going to be talking about plot holes in film and television.
Oh, yes.
And then I think we'll be talking about films we'd like to see again for the first time. So take away all that emotion and see that film again. And would you love it as much as maybe that first time? Who knows? So if you want to get in touch, if you want to get involved, or if there's anything you've heard in this episode or a previous episode, and you want to let us know, you can get in contact on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I should use TikTok more. I just don't know how to use it because I'm old and senile. We are at On The Topic Pod. We've got Gmail, which is on the topic podcast at gmail.com. And then in those posts, you'll find a link to Anchor where you can leave a voice message.
Oh, yes.
Much like some of our previous listeners. And Alex, we do have WordPress and YouTube.
Yes, on our WordPress is effectively our website. So go and have a look at that. It's ontopicpodcast.wordpress.com. Very simple, all lowercase, all one word. On there's our ugly mugs, our bios. You can look at all of our back catalogue. We've got everything on there all the way back from the weekly roundup days. You can subscribe to our newsletter so you can be notified when an episode drops and much, much more. And yes, Dan, we are now uploading our back catalogue. So every Thursday we'll do a throwback Thursday. I think we've got probably everything scheduled up until May. And then from May onwards, we'll release, along with all of the audio, the video as well to stream from YouTube. So there's literally no reason why you can't be up to date and grab time relevant, delicious audio by any means. Smash subscribe, notification button, and yeah, be ready for that lovely next episode when it's ready by myself and Dan.
There you go, put it in the oven and bake it, and it'll be ready for you soon.
Oh yeah.
So for another week, I'm off to jump on the Eggman 8 times. I've been Dan.
And I'm going to be shooting my rifle, doing some bullet sponging, and avoiding decapitated snowman heads. I'm Alex.
And we'll see you next time.